Hi, Mary Ann. Oh, no, it says it's live streaming. You see it? It says, I got a notification. Meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
I just got it.
Perfect.
Where do I want to sit? I always have to think.
Where you want to see, so you could see us.
I want to sit here or here?
It's up to you.
Right here?
After what you just said,
Right here? I don't know where.
wherever you want.
Oh, I didn't turn the TV on.
I was wondering.
Right, I kept looking over there, it's like, are we not connected? Oh. Did you send that in?
Silence my phone.
7 o'clock,
I'll take
supervisor.
care of
Okay,
You're recording and it is 7
No.
o'clock.
I just saw it and I said, oh, dear.
Okay, I want to welcome everyone to this Town of Rush workshop on October 3rd, 2022. Everyone in this room and everyone on our home Zoom device. Would you please join me in our salute to the flag?
Pledge
allegiance
to
the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Supervisor, I realize the owl is not started, so let me see if we can figure out what's going on.
Well, for that, we'll pause.
There.
Is there like a signal around here?
No,
Where's the button?
it should start as soon as it gets plugged in, so I'm gonna. Unpause it. I'm not sure. So you've got it plugged in your computer and it's plugged in.
Does it mean
here. Yeah,
Oh, here it is. There's a light going on and off when you do that.
it's red though.
It is red, but
That's not good.
it's not on.
Oh, we have
Hello, Dan.
in person.
Woo-hoo.
Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Come behind you, Councilman Bolivar.
It's spreading all my stuff.
All right, Supervisor, we are on, now people can see us at home.
Would you like us to start over?
No.
Okay. Will the deputy clerk please call the roll?
Deputy Supervisor Corbin,
Here.
Councilperson Morelli,
Here.
Councilperson Oliver, and Supervisor QC.
Here. Thank you very much. Before we get started, I want to say that for those of you who have seen it, we have a very energetic agenda to work on tonight. And because of that, before we get to the agenda, I know that most of us, if not all of us, are very interested in the budget process and where we are in that process. And we have, I hope, Tina DiNegro with us. I think she's on.
Yes, she is.
And Tina, I'm going to turn it over to you so that you can carry us through the budget process to date and give everyone a brief overview view that you feel is appropriate.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Okay, good. So I believe that everybody has received a copy of the tentative budget as it stands. The budget was submitted to the town clerk to meet the September 30th deadline. And now we have the opportunity to review the tentative, make changes to the tentative before the board needs to adopt the tentative as the official preliminary budget. Once the board adopts the tentative as the preliminary, no changes can be made until after the public hearing. So through tonight's discussion, if there's any changes we'd like to put in the budget, we can put them in now. That way they'd be in place before the budget made a motion to adopt it as the preliminary. And you have a regular meeting scheduled this week as well?
We do not.
Is it next week or?
The next meeting is next week.
Okay. So according to the guidelines put out by the state, then you would then want to take advantage of this meeting unless you called a special meeting and pursue adopting this as your preliminary.
We are going to call a special meeting because I don't think that the board members have had access to the data long enough to think about it, study it, and develop questions that they may have. Now, I could be wrong, but that's my assumption, and I'll see what the board members think.
That's correct. For me.
Absolutely.
All right, so
Lots of questions.
we will
Yes.
have a special meeting, Tina, to go over the tentative budget so that we can pass it as a preliminary budget.
Okay. Would you mind if I took a few minutes to walk everybody through the budget that you have? I think you have it in front of you, but I'm not positive.
That was my intent.
Okay. So basically, starting on page one is sort of the high-level view of the budget in its entirety. The amounts at the top of the summary page, you'll notice that the first column is appropriations. So that essentially are the expenditures that are currently built into this budget that's before you. Along the far left-hand side, you'll notice some letters. A is your general fund. Your DA is your highway town-wide. L is your library. SW is your special water district. And then SD is your special drainage district. So right now, all of these values are coming from the pages behind this one. As you work across the top of this page, the next column represents your revenues. So these are not real estate taxes and not any appropriated fund balance. So these are revenues that have been estimated and built into the tentative budget. The next column over is your appropriated fund balance. These are amounts currently built into the budget to create a balanced budget. So where revenues were not sufficient to cover expenditures, we have applied a portion of your fund balance to bring the budget into balance. And then property taxes, that is currently the amount being, again, it's in your tentative. We kept them flat. What I was trying to do per instructions that I was given was try to keep your tax rate as flat as possible. And I've got it within fractions of a penny. And that may change because right now we are still waiting for final assessments from the assessor's office. But right now, basically, the budget that's before you has been built so that your taxes your rates are as flat as we could maintain. Right now, the only district that is showing it's actually a decrease is your special water district, and that's because the debt payment that's being made is less than it has been in the past.
Tina,
So-
this is Amber. On DA though, you have an increase of 1,300. Right? If I'm seeing after property taxes, 23, property taxes, 22, increase, decrease, there's a 1,300. So I'm curious.
But if you look across to your rates, you're going to see that the rates are held flat. I was working at keeping your rates flat. Anytime your assessed units go up in value, and I anticipate they will, when I get the final numbers, your goal and instructions to me will be either to keep the tax levy amount the same or the tax rate. If I were to keep your taxes flat from last year, you would actually see a decrease in your tax rate. So these will be instructions that I'll be needing from the board to know, how you want to handle that. Again, as you work over that, you'll notice a note actually that says not updated above the 2023 assessed values and units. So we are in the process of getting those numbers, and we will update them as soon as we get them. And then the tax rates are all the way over to the far right where you can compare there. And again, they're within portions of cents. We have to turn the rates into the county out to 6 positions. So for purposes of the tentative budget, it's pretty darn close. Go ahead.
About the and the appropriated fund balances, the money built in to balance the budget. Where's that money coming from?
That is coming from your fund balance, and we can look at those balances. It's going to be on the second page, so it's a good lead into the second page of the packet that you have in front of you. So if you turn to the second page, what we have here, we have represented the main districts. We start by showing you at the very top what your fund balance consisted of as at the end of last fiscal year, 12/31/21. So if you look, it's the first gray highlighted line represents what the fund balance was in these individual funds at the end of 21. And then what we do is we project what we think your fund balance will look like at the end of 2022. And part of that equation is made up of the appropriated fund balance that we're using to balance the budget. So if you look to the very bottom, you're going to see 2022 projected. And if you look in the row that says appropriated fund balance, the account number is 914. Those numbers are being pulled in from the budgets.
Tina, could you explain to the board that our fund balance has been too high and why it has been too high?
Sure. So first of all, I will say too high is a discussion that you as a board have to make a decision on. As far as the state is concerned, the audits that we've been participating in for the last few years, the state comes in and they look and they say, at a minimum, we'd like to see your fund balance. And when I say your fund balance, I'm going to call it I'll call it your free balance, the monies that are not appropriated or assigned for any other purpose. And so in your case, that would actually be the bottom line there that says unappropriated fund balance. The number is 915 on that projected area. So the state would come in and they would say, all right, what is 25% of your annual operating budget? So I think I might have run those numbers. So right now on this projection, The 1.5 million represents about 126% of your annual operating budget in your general fund. So at a minimum, the state says, let's make sure we have 25% in it. Once we get higher than 100%, the state would come in and probably say, why are you raising taxes at all? You have enough fund balance to operate off of. Which is really truly never the case. What the state wants is transparency. So it's okay to have 126% of your available funds, but they would like to see you establish reserves to put into place a plan for those funds so they don't just continue to grow without there being an explanation to the taxpayer as to why it is going up. We do have a situation with one of your funds where you budgeted, I believe, to have some monies put into a reserve. I think I built that in for this year. That's 170,000 in your highway fund. And then this budget also reflects another contribution towards that reserve. So this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that the town should consider and start doing some long-term planning. The state would like to see our municipalities putting together at a minimum a 5-year plan. And they've got some working templates out there that are really easy to work with that would make that really, manageable. And once you have it in place, then you work it. So I work with a number of municipalities. I work with municipalities that actually lay off their highway department in the spring because they don't have enough cash flow to cover payroll. So there are both sides of the spectrum. There are times when we have towns that have substantial surpluses, and then we have got towns that have nothing available. And so I'm here to offer you as much support as I can to discuss what your options are. But this would also be part of your reason for wanting to keep your tax rate flat right now.
And can I throw in here that Bob, AKA Bob Fox, already talked to me about investing a portion of that. And he has gotten a lady, I can't remember her name. You, I'm sure, know her.
Yes, so through NICLAS. So especially in the economic status that we're in right now, NICLAS has been able to perform better than our banks have been as far as interest rates go and returns. It's just an investment tool. It's not like locking it up in a CD, which makes it nice because if we need the funds to be available, we can make a nice, easy transfer without any issues. But if you haven't met with her yet, Kathy Seville is her name, and she's with NICLAS, and I'll be happy to email you that information again.
She left me a folder.
Okay.
I just couldn't remember it. Her name.
So municipalities are still pretty restricted with what, it's very conservative. It's not really like we're able to invest them like a 401k, but it definitely can certainly earn you higher interest rates than you're getting right now in your local savings banks.
Thank you.
So page 2, again, your fund balance, you can digest that a little bit. And again, the key number on here is that appropriated fund balance line, the 914. Any changes we make to the budget that might impact how much we need to appropriate would change on this page.
Tina, is that FDIC insured, the NICLAS funds?
Yes. Yep. Then, starting with page 3, we actually get into the nuts and bolts of the budget. It's going to start with your general fund. And in all cases, with all the funds, the revenues will be presented first. And we are providing you with 2 years of actuals, the current year's budget. The estimated column is how we're trying to project how we think the town will finish the year. The requested column, for the most part, has come from the supervisor and department heads. And then the tentative is taking the requested amounts, or myself working with Jerry and Catherine to come up with, what are realistic tentatives. I'm not sure if the handout that you have some comments along the side there.
Yes,
Okay, what I'd like to say right off the bat is you're going to see the word Sally a lot, S-A-L-Y. It just stands for same as last year. So the amount in the tentative column is the same as the budget from last year. That's what that acronym stands for.
Tina, when it says per requested, who is the quote per requester?
It depending on the department head or Jerry.
And some of it's just based on what we've received and what we claim to receive, our budgeted, what our lease is, what we're getting.
And then there's several comments to say payroll projection. That is referencing a separate tool that we use to bring together all of the salaries for all of the individual positions from the town. And we build it out with raises, with benefits, et cetera. And the information from that tool pulls into the budget.
So with the Sally, I don't know, in private practice, we like to say Sally doesn't live here anymore. Because it should be justified, I think, compared to what was the budgeted amount in the prior year? Was it used? And the difference, and to explain why that is needed.
So in many cases, I'll give you an example. If you, on page 3, if you, it's kind of down towards the bottom there, the very first line that says SALY, if you look all the way over to the left, it's the AIM-related payment. It's been consistent for 2 years of actuals plus the budget. I mean, that makes perfect sense to keep that.
More concerned with that in the expenditure side of things. So not so much on the revenue, I get that one if that's a consistent number, but some of the other ones that are further down in under the appropriations and,
Okay, so let's, and again, I think we were looking at your 2 years of actual. So for example, if you look down to the account number AA 1410.400 clerk contractual expenditures, you've got 2 years of actuals that swing between 10,000 and 14,000, and we've got 15,000 in the tentative.
Okay. There's a $78,000 contingency. What does that mean?
So your contingency monies are basically monies that we're putting into contingencies for unforeseen expenses that we can't predict. Last year, you elected to put 78,000 in that line. Now, what's a contingency line is allowed to be used in your budgetary process, but when it comes to doing your year-end financials, you'll actually learn that this number does not exist. So we don't actually pay for expenditures out of this line, but what we would do is, let's say, I don't know, the boiler went and you had to invest $12,000 to make that emergency repair. we would do a budget line transfer and transfer monies from the contingency line and increase the expenditure line that it was used to cover the expense.
Was that just easier rather than taking it from the unexpended balance?
I wasn't a part of your budget process last year. I have a large majority of the towns that we work with do usually put some form of contingency in. But it varies from municipality to municipality.
I mean, I don't really have a problem with that, but we are budgeting for that in our taxes, correct?
Yes.
When we have a surplus that's in our unexpended fund balance. Just saying.
I could speak to last year, right at the end of the budget process, we realized that we didn't have monies in there for the comprehensive plan. And we didn't know really what that was going to cost.
Good
We had
example.
not gone out to a bid. So we estimated we had $28,000 in there, which was pretty much a norm for the years before that. But the unexpended balance would not be, if it was going to be brought in as a targeted expenditure, we would bring that into the budget on a line rather than leave it. The unexpended balance, we only, you could correct me, Tina, but we don't really budget monies from the unexpended balance unless we target it and bring it into the budget. We would bring that in there and then reduce our, increase how much we're gonna keep taking from the unexpended balance and put it into our budget. So the goal is that's the balance being to make sure that we have enough money to keep our taxes low and our tax rate flat. So this is sort of a balance being. But right now we're trying to see what we actually plan to spend. And then the roof is a perfect example. We did have to expend more and we had the unexpended balance, so we can always balance it out.
And Tina's example was
Mhm.
excellent
Yeah.
also, and that was, although Tina used the term boiler, we didn't have the boiler breakdown, but we had a furnace expense.
Mhm.
Oh,
One alone was $12,000.
yeah.
We follow the guidelines of the state controller and they don't want us to they don't want us to guess, but we end up with those emergency experiences. We can take money from the unexpended balance, but
And I believe the state actually allows for you to budget up to 10% of your budget in contingency. It's actually,
the limit, yeah. We ran into that last year and we were still underneath the limit.
I should have said that, and Tina, I'd like you to continue to emphasize that, and that is nothing that we have done, nothing that we have changed is out of compliance with the state controller. We just aren't operating in that mode. We are making sure that we comply, making sure that we don't raise taxes, and making sure that we take good care of our employees.
Yeah. And that we're under the cap.
yep.
So I appreciate all that, and please bear with me. I'm new on the board this year. I have not gone through the budget, and this is how my mind works, so.
Yeah,
I need-
absolutely.
Can we go back up to the revenues for a second?
Sure.
Under AA 2001 Park and Recreational Charges.
What page are you on, Jean?
I'm sorry, on page 3.
Okay,
I
thank you.
apologize.
Can you give that number again for me?
AA 2001 in the revenue section.
Yeah.
Park and recreational charges. That seems to be all over the board. I don't know what's in there. Why would we budget in 22, $81,000?
So that is your park and recreation charges. So your after-school programs and events. And of course, with COVID in 2020 and 2021, you weren't able to hold programs 1 year, then slowly bringing them back in. And I'm not sure, but I'm seeing this all over the board. I've got large towns with large programs in place, and either they couldn't staff their programs, they weren't able to sell out their programs because of COVID. And I believe, and Catherine, you can help me with this, but I think these are the amount that's in the tentative is based off the current programs that are being presented for this year, which
This is from
hopefully
our rec-
next year rather, hopefully we don't get shut down again and you can have some pretty steady programs to rely on.
Understand what was in there because it was big swings and that makes sense to me.
These have been, this tentative budget reflects what Pat has in terms of her registrants. For the after school is the bulk of it.
Yeah,
And then we have never really had a loss of funding for aerobics and exercise classes. And so, and she's actually run a few other programs. So this is
Okay.
a very, but this is very conservative. The 22 budget was very ambitious and really almost unachievable because it was just so late that we still were coming out of the pandemic. So we worked to make sure that that's, it is based on registration. So this is pretty solid. If it goes up, that's fine and well and good, but it's a good number.
okay. It makes
A
sense
very
to
good
me.
number, yeah.
The money's always been there, but the participants haven't always been there.
Well, you mean
Well.
the expenses. The expenses, you know,
Yeah.
once you start to have a program, you have to have expenses.
Participants create
I was just looking
expenses.
on the revenue side for now
Yeah,
as we go
exactly.
through
Yeah,
this, but
It was shut down with COVID.
no, that it
Right.
makes perfect sense when you explain what's in
Yeah.
that line item, so.
Thank you.
And then the line item right below that is the Pavilion Rentals.
Right,
And that again is based on, it's actually conservative. We're going to exceed that amount this year. 20.
Okay.
So we left it at 20 because just never know.
okay, that's good.
And that one, that 14,833, we just got it last week. So it's coming.
You have another one, Jean? Go for it, because obviously we have a lot to get through. We've got lots of questions, so. I wanna
Okay,
hear what
are
you
we
have to
doing
say.
this, going down,
Well.
or are we doing this at our workshop?
If you can ask the big questions tonight and save the detail and smaller questions for
I
the
can save the
workshop, that would
detail.
be good.
No, I could save the detail.
You're okay. I don't care what anyone says. Thank you.
Oh, that, you wouldn't, not gonna stop me.
I know that.
Thank you.
And don't forget, we've got a fourth quarter sales tax coming up also, which is going to significantly raise revenue.
So Tina, on page 3 at the bottom, under unexpended balance, you're saying to balance the budget, we need to take out $90,313 from the unexpended balance.
Correct.
So,
And you do, and just so you know, like you'll notice, for example, in the column that says estimated, the 2022 estimated, you did appropriate monies in your budget, which you can see in the next column over where it's your 2022 budget. But I'm estimating that you're going to have enough revenue to come in to cover your expenses in 2022. So you won't have to touch the fund balance you had appropriated for your 22 budget. So
Tina, we have a running report for over the last 10 years, and we have never actually touched the unexpended balance, which I think raises this issue of this 5-year plan, so that we can have some targeted expenses, because we, even looking here, we probably have to increase our state aid mortgage tax, because we already got the 88, we're planning on 120. This is a very conservative revenue picture, and every year we exceed it. So
correct. So, and let me just make a point about that, because I personally would never recommend that you, how do I say it? Let me back this up. You want to budget revenue conservatively. If for example, when the pandemic hit, we were trying to estimate, no one could have predicted, for example, that sales tax was going to skyrocket, that people were going to sit at home for 2 years and shop off of Amazon. You know, it's a moving target. So there's elements of revenue that are predictable. But even if you look at, even your mortgage tax, it was 113 in 2020, 135 in 21. Now interest rates are going back up again. So we're going to see it have a different kind of impact on mortgage tax. So in one sense, we do want to be conservative on the revenue items that we just can't target, because if you too closely budget your revenues and then something fails, then the opposite is going to happen in your budgeting process and you're going to lose fund balance over time. So we've just had some really banner sales tax years in the last 3 years. That's probably the most significant revenue source that's been difficult to track. So
Tina, you're doing a good job, but we've got a large agenda to get through for this week.
okay, so anyways, I am happy to answer any questions you have, but if you were, the general fund ends on page 5, the way the tentative is currently constructed. And then your highway fund fits on one page. So on page 6, the rest of the budget fits nice and tidy on one page. So it's kind of easy for you to see your revenues over your expenditures. And actually, as I'm looking at your highway, I'm already out of balance. I must have made a change. So if you look at on page 6 at the unexpended balance line, you're going to see right under where it says to balance budget a negative 1,300. So we must have made a last minute change and I didn't adjust the.
So that's like the question, Amber, that was just the general fund. Now the highway fund, we have another number to balance. The budget would come in from the unexpended balance.
Mhm.
And the same thing for the library.
Right.
The funds that we have estimated from the unexpended balance have really stayed quite, either lowered or stayed pretty much the same. One of the questions that has been raised is that we see that the fire department is going to increase their tax rate. And that does impact our residents, our taxpayers. And we have quite a good cushion, so we may want to have that as a discussion point, whether we can, we're certainly way within our unexpended balance, just our projections. And really, these are very conservative, because we know we're going to get more sales tax. We know we're going to get more mortgage tax than because we've already gotten the first payment. So we know a lot of additional funds are going to come in. So this is a pretty conservative budget. And at the same time, it is something that maybe we could look at to make sure that we can think about our taxpayers and the impact that other expenses are going to be because of some changes.
Well, I'm sure we're going to talk about it at a workshop, and I look forward to that. I mean, it's conservative on some levels. Some things are not so conservative. As when I look through the details, some of the payroll costs are not conservative.
Don't forget, you're not looking at a final budget. So
I know,
we all have
but this
our,
is what I have to look at.
we all have our chance in the pulpit to say what we like and what we don't like. So that could easily change.
Yes, I agree that. I agree. And that's why we're doing this.
So we've stayed within the values and principles that the supervisor had identified back in end of July or August in terms of principles of how we would operate. So I think we've done that. I think we're gonna make some changes because we have to get the assessor's updated report. We have not increased the value of the town considerably, but a little bit. And then we have to just pass this budget through the cap process. So I'm not sure what, and when is the next workshop, so we can move to the,
Yeah, we have to schedule it so we can
So we
stay
can-
on schedule, right?
by next week, because.
I will schedule that with Pam.
and-
So
and-
my question, Tina, as far as documentation for requests from departments, how do we go about getting that? So we can look at what you have proposed here, and we can get a better understanding as to different requests as to how numbers came up. Is that something that you would provide to us, Tina? Or do I? Advisor?
I can provide you the spreadsheets that I was given, but pretty much everything that's in that requested column is exactly what they requested. I'm looking to see if I really.
Looking for the workup papers that would have said, this is what my department is requesting, and here's how I came up with, you know, $100,000. That's where it came from, such as Jean's request of that, they're same as last year, Sally, but did they actually use all that amount up in their budget for 2022 to request that same amount? Or for an increase in salary or wages, things like that.
So you could look,
Go ahead.
when we worked with Tina, the recommendation was to go with what 29 other towns do and have just 3 funds. Historically, we have broken up to have the assessor, the court, the clerk, the recreation, the historian, and everybody got aligned, the building inspector, the code enforcer. And we didn't do that because Tina said, no other towns do that. They have 3 funds. So we worked with highway, we worked with the library. The library came in other than salary because there's, you know, we had benchmarks for salary, but everybody else went into their fund. And then any questions, we like, for example, the revenues for recreation, we worked with the recreation supervisor to really try to see what does this number mean. But we did not, we sent out an informational request saying 3 questions. Are you planning on any additional contractual expenditures? Are they going to go up or down? And second, are you having any equipment needs that you have? So every area has 3 questions only: personnel, benefits, contractual, and equipment. Well, personnel and benefits are really not at their levels. And so Jerry, we created some new salary wage schedules. We also really worked with Mark David because he has been having extreme difficulties recruiting new employees. So we had 4 primary goals. 1, recruitment and retention. We also had difficulties with recruiting people for the clerk and clerical positions. Over the last 2 years, we've had difficulty.
And we're still at it.
And we're still at it. So we had the goal of having benchmarks, not only within other towns, but benchmarks within the community. What is the market telling us we have to do? Second, we have to try to start to have some equity amongst different departments. Third, we had to look at the highway department, especially because they were having extreme difficulty recruiting employees. And we've always thought, well, they're great because they have salary plus benefits plus, you know, access to retirement. Well, we really looked at every single area. And then we looked at what we have done for the last 4 years in terms of salary wage increases and realized we didn't do anything for 2019, 2020, other than some minimal merit increases that were already built in. We had the pressure of having the minimum wage go up, it'll go up again this year, and that became sort of a baseline. And then third, we had a real recognition that we had given many people last year 5.9% as the cost of living. We wanted to measure that out for those who got 5.9. We in this tentative budget, we put 4.1, so that's 10%. Many people last year only got 3%. So we balanced that out in 7%. So over the last 4 years, they would get, everybody would get 10% over 4 years. Then within there, we had some outliers that we won't put names to them, but we had outliers that went up, 30% because of pressures of the market. So they can, in a workshop, we can identify them, but every single person, we sat down with Jerry, I presented it to Tina, we went through every single person. So This budget is so detailed in terms of information, but the principles really become the anchor to make sure that people understand why we have those amounts. And I think that might be a way to sort of look at that. But this again, from a real understanding of 4 years coming out of the pandemic, this is a very conservative budget, but an ambitious budget. But we made a commitment last year to make sure that we would not raise taxes this year. People came and said, well, you can lower them for 1 year, but what about next year? But within this budget, there are some opportunities to make sure that we can sustain that. We have revenue expected from solar, from cannabis, from other venues that are going to become sustainable on a regular basis. We have that. So I think, again, this is an opportunity for us not to just look at this, but to look at some of those areas where we can help our seniors and get more exemptions, help our fire department. This can be very, very clear that we can still use some of the unexpended balance without jeopardizing 5 years from now, 10 years from now. This is and Tina has done a remarkable job of making it be more online with 29 other towns. So it's a real baseline year. Next year, we need to look at benefits. We need to look to see whether we can afford to have all these, the cost of benefits for healthcare, for flexible spending accounts, but that has to be a much longer term inquiry, and we could never possibly do it in October of the year.
And you said some things are very conservative, but some things are not.
Yes.
I want to make sure that you bring that up at the next meeting, not at this one, but at the next meeting.
I will, but I think it would be helpful, and I appreciate your detailed explanation, and I'm sure you internally did everything you just said you did, but I think it would be helpful if we could see the buildup to it.
Yeah,
So
that's
from the various department heads, the requests and how that worked out, so that we could satisfy ourselves and understand it.
But that's Jerry did everything in the general. fund.
Okay, I know, but there's 5 people on the board that are elected. We are all personally responsible to the citizens of this town. And I appreciate, I'm not saying that it won't stay the same. I'm just saying that we need to be satisfied that we understand what went to the buildup of those numbers.
Oh, yeah, but that's.
So if I could interject just for a moment, I'll give you a few more figures for the board to consider. In the general fund, 61% of the budget that's there before the tentative, 61% makes up just your wages and benefit lines. So if you spend the majority of your time working on the payroll projections that we put together and the salary increases, you will deal with the majority of the expenditures here in this particular budget. The budget that's before you right now is $8,500 more than your 2022 budget. And that reflects payroll increases and benefit increases. So I would argue that the budget that's here before you that Jerry and Catherine have put a lot of effort into is far more conservative than it was even for your 2022. I won't get in the mix of all of that. I'm just here to you're just going to be your personal analyzer. I'll provide you all the numbers I can and any advice or counsel that I can offer you. Go ahead.
Tina, could you repeat 61% is what?
So 61% of the 1,392,000, that's your tentative currently in your general fund, consists of wages and payroll, or wages and benefits. So payroll basically. And as you become more familiar with the way the chart of accounts are set up, any one of the accounts that is followed with a 100, that is a wage line. And so if you were to go through and add up any of the accounts that like AA.1620.100, buildings, personal services, that's going to be wages. And then all of the benefits are going to be at the bottom of each individual fund. They are in the 9,000s. The account begins with a 9. So that you can just look at the impact that the just payroll and benefits are having on the overall budget. The other big impact, really, I mean, we know that fuel, and energy costs are going up, right? But will they go up so much that they would tip your budget? No. But capital expenditures, that's your next big. So I would say focus your energy on your payroll and benefits first, followed by any equipment requests that have come through, because that's going to be your next big hit, and it's non-operating. So your capital, they're one-offs. So those will be the ones that will have an impact on using your fund balance or whatever one time out.
Tina, where would we see that in this paperwork?
So anything that's got a 2 after the account are going to be equipment. Everything that has a 400 those are your larger buckets. That's your office supplies, your utility bills, stuff that's very reoccurring, that you really can unless you go out and maybe secure a new copier lease or something to that effect. Those expenses tend to stay the same. I believe though, like for the clerks this year, postage is going up again. So if you're mailing out all your tax bills, there was probably a little bit of a increase for that. But in a $1.3 million budget, an extra $500 for postage is small. So because you have limited time to try and work through these things, and this is a very large job that you've been elected to do, I just would encourage you to focus your energy on, because that is really where the bulk of your expense lies.
I'd just like to reinforce though that the structure of this budget is different, but the ingredients are still the same. So what we did, so Jerry has taken the role for the general account. And with his directive, we sent out a request to make sure that anybody had any kind of additional contractual needs, that they were planning on doing a huge conference or a huge something, or explore equipment. So we sent it out to everyone. So whether it was the assessor or the court, anything that would be outside of the norm. So when you look at same as last year, that was at the request of those department directors or officials. So one of the things that is changed is that some of the officials had sort of felt that they had a budget of revenues and expenditures. Example of the court. The court has nothing to do with the revenues that they take in. They can't make them more, they can't make them less. All they can do is have the office, their staff, and recognize what do they need to run business. But they cannot, and they should not, because ethically they can't say we're going to go out there and get more people to and find them more money. So there's a recognition in this budget that those revenues sit there and we take them in the general fund, and we expend them in the general fund, and the model is every other town in this area, so that Jerry, as the supervisor, is in charge of that whole general fund. If there's anything that does become an emergency or anything that needs to go to the contingency, it has to go to the supervisor, and that discussion with that department director or supervisor. We really have, that's a dramatic change. But to answer the question, did they have involvement? Did they have control of what they wanted to say? Right, I need, for the assessor is a great example. He was going to do a community-wide reassessment 2 years ago. He needed about $10,000, $15,000 more to do that. Didn't spend it, but he needed it. Well, he doesn't need it in the budget now. So we really were very conscientious. So we saved a lot of money in those contractual layers, and in turn recognize that we have the major issue that I think should be addressed at the workshop is that we probably need more money in postage and office supplies because we're just spending for the subboards and everybody's getting $10 first class mailings and stuff. There's ways to save money, go green, but it's a team effort. It's not the responsibility of any staff person to do that. So that's the board, where the board could say, let's try to monitor these costs as subboard cost.
This will be great
Yeah.
detail for our budget meeting. I was not intending to get into that detail tonight. I just wanted everyone to see it. Ask some high-level questions to get them grounded. And so that we can get into that level of detail.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that you really were recognized as having spent the kind of time and detail with the officials to, and that we did send out those inquiries. So whether they, and with folks like recreation or that's probably more comprehensive to see, to make sure that we had good numbers.
And you haven't said anything bad, so that's good.
If you have any questions between now and when you meet, I'm happy to help answer anything that I can. And I would just throw out one more caveat in the discussions of your fund balances, as far as that goes. The hope would be that you've got solid department heads that are making good choices. But as the board, I love to encourage you to think strategically, think about forward planning, because you do have those fund balances. Like I said, you can lock an operating budget in, I think, relatively easily. As soon as you know what you want your raises and benefits to look for, it's going to flow pretty easy. After you get through this budget season, I would encourage your next steps to be looking at developing a fund balance policy and putting that 5-year plan in place, because that really will help you really plan out. Okay, we talked about this last year. We've put this we've got a plan in place for how we want to replace our equipment over the next 10 years. We have a plan in place for, making improvements and changes to our town hall, our parks. And once we plan it, then we've got a plan to follow. And I feel like at times when I get involved with a town, we don't have it locked down for you to, really visually see how this can impact the future of the town. I would just encourage you to keep walking down that path as you get through this budget process. This is the first step in the process, and you have so much more you can be talking about afterwards that will have really significant long-term impacts.
I agree, Tina. I've looked at that fund balance for several years and wondered why it was just out there. It wasn't strategically invested with the future in mind. And that's the direction we're going in now.
Which is great.
We pulled some funds out of that. I think Highway took a.
Well, they're the only one that has a reserve fund. But what I will do for the board is to get, and Tina, I think you've seen it, is this 10-year review of how much we have ended up with the unexpended balance. So even though we wanted to spend it, in truth, every year we've only added more to it. So it's going back to what Tina said. It actually goes back to what Councilperson Wooliver said last time. Let's get going. Let's spend that money from ARPA, because that's another chunk that's not even in here. These are outside the budget. We have funds that we can allocate for the 1911. That is, again, it's not tax dollars. Those are revenues that were generated. I did a forensic study of how much money's it was received by rents, documented, and we can use those funds to really help get that work done. So I think we're in very good shape, and really having us start to get an insight to what other towns do, we're in very good shape. And I think you'd agree with me, Tina, right? We're in good shape.
Yeah, well, yeah, like I said, it's a lot easier for me to work with you. You've got some funds, so we could have a lot of fun figuring out how to use them. It's a lot harder if I'm working with a town that hasn't raised any taxes and have minuscule fund balances. So this is more enjoyable for me to work with than the alternative. I don't want your fund balances to be thought of as a negative. You're just now in a position to really, like I said, think strategically about how you'd like to use them.
Any other high-level questions for Tina before we lose her?
I just want Tina to know we have 2 new board members that have never been through this. You have myself that's only been through it a couple of times, and this new version, this is only the second time. So the amount of information that we need to satisfy being able to make valid and decisions for our residents in Rush is why we're asking these questions, because
Sure, of course.
data-driven person, and just looking at a sheet with numbers, I need to know where the numbers come from.
That's
Absolutely.
Tina, when I first was elected to this position, I was naive enough to think, knowing that I had a CPA to my left, I wanted to give that budget responsibility to that person for a year. Knowing I had a data-driven former teacher to my right, I wanted to give that to her for a year. Then I found out from the state controller, thou shalt not. That screwed up my plans.
Yep, nope, it's all in your head.
There you go. I think we're done for tonight, and I thank you very much, Tina.
You're welcome. Like I said, if I can be of help, please let me know.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good night.
All right, we can now move on to the reason why this workshop is being conducted, and we're probably going to have Robert Marks, our attorney for the town, start us off with the cannabis dispensary discussion.
Certainly. So there's really 2 topics that we could talk about tonight. So it's my understanding I should start off by saying that,
Oh, where'd she go? I wanted to thank Mrs. Hankins for being here to fill in some of the detail. I didn't intend for that, but it was helpful to go for it. So I'm sorry for the
no, it's
interruption.
okay. So it's my understanding that the town did not opt out of either the dispensaries or the on-site consumption establishments, right? So there's 2 different types. The dispensaries is where you would go to buy cannabis, and then the on-site consumption would be more like a bar situation where you are buying it in order to use it on the site. The New York State obviously has created this cannabis board. It's going to be pretty highly regulated license for all of these entities. But the town and some municipalities have already decided that they want to restrict it further. And there's different ways to do that, and really two main ways. So there's time, place, and manner in terms of where it can be used. So generally speaking, under New York state law, it's treated the same as smoking tobacco. So those restrictions are already in place. But towns or municipalities can also say, we don't want it on sidewalks, and we don't want it in our parks, and those kinds of things as well. And so we've had municipalities do that, and that's something that for the board to consider. And the other, so that's one, and then the other main way to regulate this further would be to decide where in the town to allow these establishments to be able to operate. So, for instance, you can say we wanted it's fine in all districts, or it's only in commercial districts that we want on-site consumption, but we'd rather have dispensaries in R20 as well. I mean, it's totally up to you as to where in the town and these zoning districts you would like these establishments to be. You can treat them the same or differently. You know, they are different in terms of what types of establishments they are, but you can treat them the same or differently. So what our suggestion is to take a look at, for this topic in particular, take a look at the zoning map, determine, you know, if we say R20, where exactly does that mean these things could end up? If we say commercial, where exactly does that mean? And the other thing to keep in mind is that some of these are already not allowed near, for instance, school grounds or house of worship, so within 500 feet of school grounds or 200 feet of worship. These are already restricted. So the other thing to keep in mind is, well, like for instance, there's a church obviously at the end of the road, so can't have one within 200 feet of that church. So if we say commercial, we need to be cognizant, the board needs to be cognizant of what exactly does that mean, because also it's restricted further, in this circular radius around, I'm not sure, is Leary and Rush?
Mhm.
Leary, right, another big, and then the schools, and then this church at the end of the road, so all things for the board to consider, and fairly easy for us to implement in terms of local laws. Any questions?
How about discussion?
Discussion would be great. I think it's easy with a map in front of you, if you have a map.
Yeah, discussion of opinions is what I'd prefer.
Did you share the recommendations I gave you with the rest of the board?
Yes, they're here.
I don't, I'll go make copies for these two. Unless you have extras.
No.
What do you look, I have this.
No, Don had sent something to Jerry, so.
Okay.
I don't know how relevant my opinion will be because I don't think like some of the people I'm associated with in terms of using that particular substance. And I know I have debates with my children all the time. Even the ones that are 60 years old. What you laughing at, girl? And I'm told you ought to get with it. Well, I guess in this regard, I am getting with it because I want our community to be able to take advantage of any revenue that this could feed into the community. But anyway, I just tried to set you up for my opinion that this should be right in the center of town in the commercial district. That's my opinion. I don't know if anyone else shares this. We haven't discussed it. The reason I want to see that is because I am opposed to on the outskirts or in farther out areas of town, having something like this because it can't be monitored, it can get out of control. And I don't think it would be good for the community to have that. So I'm very much in favor of having it right in the center of town. I think we're talking about the use or the lounge district. I have different opinion on sales district
Dispensaries.
or dispensaries, yeah. But anyway, that I let somebody else talk because I've probably exhausted my my position
So
today.
typically, do dispensaries permit you to use it on premises? No.
No, yeah, so the dispensary is, I would consider it more like a pharmacy, and that you go into to purchase the substance, and then you would leave, and you're probably talking, I mean, fairly minimal traffic, or there's not many people staying there. You go in and you purchase what you're looking for, or a liquor store is another good example. An on-site consumption establishment is much more closely resembling a bar, right? Where you're going there, you are consuming the substance, and then you're leaving from there after having consumed it normally.
In the state, new laws, can they be one and the same?
No, well, I
That's
don't
what I was
know if,
wondering.
I didn't think so.
I don't, it's not, I haven't heard of that. I don't know that an establishment could become a dispensary or an on-site consumption establishment. Or, excuse me, like a mix of the two.
Mhm.
I think if you're an on-site consumption establishment, I doubt that you're allowed to take it out of that facility.
Oh, I
I
see.
agree.
That's my understanding. And this is all obviously incredibly new. So
Right,
I don't
right.
even think that one exists yet in the state, either a dispensary or an on-site consumption. We're probably talking next year.
There's been dispensaries established for medical marijuana use, but
Correct.
not for the recreation.
Okay.
The medical marijuana has been approved, legal much longer. But this general use is probably you're looking at next year, I would guess, by the time these establishments start opening up.
You were just referring to a lounge, I'll call it a lounge,
Sure.
because I know what I mean by that.
Yep.
You're talking about a lounge and someone leaving the lounge while using the product, is that?
I'm imagining they have to stay in the air, in the on-site, excuse me, in the lounge. They have to stay in the lounge while using it.
Because we've had a past history of enforcement with the local
Lounge.
lounge, there you go. Was consuming out in the street.
Right, so that's a great example. So, for instance, if the town adopted a local law that said, no public consumption, no person shall smoke or vape cannabis while on a public sidewalk, street, highway, parking lot, and then obviously it's already prohibited from using in a vehicle, then you can't take it out of the on-site consumption. You can't take it out of the lounge without being in violation of the law.
And on the setback, like for schools and houses of worship, is that to the property line or is that to the structure?
That's a good question.
I think it's to the property.
I would guess the
That's
property
how
line
I
as
would
well.
enforce it.
I know, I think it is the property line, but there are other restrictions that are more. Yeah, it says 500 feet of school grounds. So again, I would say grounds being the property line.
Property line.
There is also use restriction, so that's different. That's for instance, the places where the lounges or the dispensaries can be situated. There's also restrictions associated with where you can use it. And that's more resembling smoking issues where you can't use it within 100 feet of an entrance or an exit of a elementary school or secondary school or a public library.
Library.
Correct, library and then school bus.
Okay. So what's the deal with the library? Okay, because we have a library right here.
So, but
The
that's
school is
just use.
further up the road.
Right. So again, so that's the other topic. So that's
Okay,
just
all
use.
right.
Okay,
Can we start with one? Because we're
Yeah.
jumping all over the place. I don't know how you guys feel, but my brain's going. "Brr."
Yeah.
So we have this dispensary on the first page that John, and then we have on-site consumption. So should we try to do
Just the dispensaries versus.
just
school.
dispensaries first?
Sounds
Where?
Works for
that's-
me.
Otherwise,
I would also suggest that whatever we do, we coordinate with a comprehensive plan
mhm,
because, they're looking at all of this. And I don't know whether any of that came up in the discussion of the Hamlet, as specifically a place when we look at, what Jerry just said, having some of this
I think
located.
one of our concerns might be, however, though, that with many of these entities potentially coming and wanting to get established in Rush, the comprehensive plan is not going to be complete for a while,
True, but the discussions are going on right now
right?
that are going to go into the survey.
And
And they just had a discussion on the
Just keep
Hamlet.
them in the loop so they
Mhm.
understand.
I,
there's a
I,
concurrent
I
path.
agree. Before we do anything, we should,
No, I agree. We have to make a decision. Are we not going to make a local law, change our zoning until that's further down the road, but I agree, keep them in the loop,
right,
talk about it and.
but the state law is going to be effective?
Well, and before, well, it is right now.
It's effective now.
It's
The reason why
effective
these
now.
places you haven't
Well-
seen them is because they haven't got licensed from the cannabis board,
And,
which
and
is still,
that
plugging
makes
along.
the state law well ahead of a comprehensive plan law or legislation, whatever. we
well,
call
that's,
it.
that's why it's important to consider this now
No,
before these start.
The one we've got in town right now on Rush Scottsville Road, their license from the New York State Board is to grow and distribute to places like these, the
The
dispensaries.
dispensaries.
Right now, they're shipping a lot of it out of state, but they would never be a dispensary for the rank and file. They're a commercial.
Right, so that's a separate kind of
It's
establishment.
different license altogether, so.
That doesn't fall into this. So if we were gonna look at just dispensaries, your notes say zoning not specifically permitted in any zoning district, right?
Yeah, I.
They're
when
just
Terry asked me to do
suggestions,
this, it
right.
was just, what were the zoning considerations? What were some other things we should look at and potential recommendations? Yeah.
And I concur with Jerry, unless someone can convince me otherwise, that I agree it should be a limited location. Because this is a commercial business.
Right, and I did commercial locations within the hamlet, but the one thing I was looking at is we've got to make sure we've got parking, which you don't have a lot of in the hamlet. So if you went out, because it's been incorporated into ag and markets for New York State, I also thought that you might be able to go to some of your existing farm markets because they've got parking. They would be willing to put up a separate building because I didn't think you should have sales of cannabis in with kids buying pumpkins. So you would have, a separate building where they could do this. You would have the parking. One of the things that I think you really got to look at is ADA accommodations, because a lot of the folks that use them are going to have medical situations or perceived medical situations, so you want to be cognizant of that. And I also thought that you've got some of your light industrial and commercial areas where you've got parking, they're out of the way, they're out of residential neighborhoods. You don't want somebody doing this out of their house. But the problem with limited industrial is right now you're only allowed 5% of the land in an area like that to be used for retail sales. So that leaves you with the hamlet or specific locations outside of the hamlet.
Well, I think at the same time, I know one of the questions in the survey that was on the county website was density is something to talk about. And I know I would like to have that incorporated into our zoning local law, because we don't need 5 in a row. We don't need 20 in town. If there is, one in the hamlet, is that enough? Is that enough for the town, or one? What's that?
I would think it'd be enough.
That,
but we could,
where I'm
Like
going.
we
competition,
could-
though.
Yeah,
restrict that. I think our zoning, or it used to say you couldn't even have 2 gas stations within
stations, right.
500 feet of each other. So there could be something similar to lounges within 500 feet of each other, or so we could decide whatever that is.
We've got one gentleman right now down here at the building next, I think it's immediately next to the Creekside Graves. They've got the 2 apartments upstairs and they've got the retail space on the first floor.
Yes,
He's interested in pursuing obtaining a license as a dispensary.
as a dispensary, not a lounge.
Correct.
Wait a minute. He told me a lounge.
Oh, but again, I wasn't party to that when I talked to him.
And I don't know if I'm thinking of this with an outdated approach, but in my lifetime, I've known of 2 way out of the action bars, and they've always been a problem. They were always a problem. They've both been shut down. But prior to being shut down, they were always a problem because they were out of contact with.
well, I think if we keep it to commercial,
I was recently in California,
That was what?
and my son pointed out a dispensary, light industrial.
Okay,
It was, well, it was near the rental car place we use. There's a dispensary. It's just,
just looks like a business front, right?
yeah, just
Mhm.
brick building. Like,
So we would have to change the code only if we were, because in our current code, it's only 5%. So
Yeah.
then if you're going to change that, we have to think larger picture, because now we're allowing other in the limited industrial versus just this type of
Regardless of
thing.
where you place it, what zoning district, you might want to consider, they have to have a special permit in order to operate, and then you'd have to look at what are the criteria that you want for the special permit. I don't know if there's, because it's so new, I don't know that there's anything we could plagiarize.
Dan, can you take a guess as to the distance between Graves and
The
St.
church.
Joe's?
Joe's,
Damn close, I think.
yeah, maybe thinking
100 yards.
if that. think
No, I don't even think
it's
100
close.
yards.
I think it's
That's not a
closer than
football
that. I was
field.
thinking
I'd say 50.
70, in that area.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And then, again, like. Robert
Then
said,
that's just beyond, that's state law.
Yeah, you've
Right,
got,
right.
the
We
state,
can't-
you've got the smoking laws, you've got the ag and market laws, and now you've got this new cannabis board
Mhm.
regulations for
Yeah.
this stuff. So you really got to look between 3 or 4 different statutes in order to establish
Right,
districts.
that's tight. In this little strip
In the
here.
hamlet, it would be, unless you want to do it at the 1911 house.
Joel,
Yeah, again, there's,
well, all these properties are commercial. Any of these
Right.
houses could be converted to it.
They could be,
Mhm.
they could be.
Well, I guess the question to us, do we agree commercial?
That's where I'm
Is that
leaning.
where we start?
Count me in.
the commercial, you've got those corridors along
Yeah,
West
mhm.
Henrietta Road.
Yeah,
No, but again, is somebody gonna build a new building to do this within a commercial district, or are we going to allow it? Like I say, you've got a plethora of farm markets.
I'm not in favor of farm market.
Okay, so-
I don't, that's just my gut reaction.
and again, that's what the value of the discussion
Mhm.
is,
Right.
I think if we're looking at this as a quote, like a liquor store, or a product is being dispensed that is not grown on the
Right,
premises. It's been packaged somewhere else, it's been processed, it's an actual product. It seems as though we have zoning of commercial just for that purpose of utilizing. We've got our 4 corners up here, well, 3 actually, but right off exit 11, where we've got commercial businesses. Yeah, I've got it right here. So
that's true, that's all commercial.
that's all commercial. The old dorsal property, I mean, yeah,
I'm with
You could
you,
have one
I'm
on every
leaning towards
corner.
existing commercially zoned property, restricting it to commercial.
And so is that I just want to be clear, are we talking dispensaries and lounges or
I'm-
just?
I'm
Dispensary right now. right?
I'm only on dispensaries. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, we're
Okay,
on dispensaries right now.
okay.
So then density, can we limit it, Robert, to say only one in town? I mean, you can't limit, well, you kind of get, right? How,
So here's what I'll read you this.
okay.
Cities, villages, towns may pass local laws governing time, place, manner. Provided such laws or regulations do not make the operation of such dispensaries or on-site consumption sites unreasonably impracticable as determined by the Cannabis Board. So if, for instance, if we said commercial districts and between the church and, I don't know, the school's not close enough, I don't think, but the church and the school, that rules out the commercial district, well, then that you essentially opted out without actually opting out, right? Density restrictions, I will have to research that. I don't know, in terms of limiting it to one. But my initial fear is that making it impractical to have one here?
Mhm.
What if you welcomed one, but you just didn't run anymore for whatever the reason?
Right,
Well, it's like our solar law. The previous board developed it because the purpose, and Dan, correct me, was to help our local farmers, but have small 3 to 5, 4 to 5 different projects in town,
right,
not a massive one.
right. No, I think,
Not
I
20.
think density restrictions, this is gonna be a close analysis in terms of, I think you can have density restrictions. Can you limit it to one? Can you limit it to, within 1,000 feet? Is it 500 feet? Is it 200 feet? I'm not, that might be a much closer analysis in terms of,
Well, we have 3 commercial districts from what I can see on the map. Can you say one per commercial zone district? I don't know.
right. And I'm sure, well, I don't know if they have it yet, but I'm sure that the cannabis board will end up issuing opinion letters or administrative decisions, recommendations in which they will have these questions asked of them. And we'll have the answers. But my guess, my gut is that it's not an exact science of, we can let 2, but not 1. I think it's going to be a gray area in terms of how closely regulated can we density restrict these?
Which we could think of in terms of feet.
I think the market would determine how many we had. If there was demand for 2, there'd be 2.
Right,
That's
right.
it. But
I
we don't have
agree.
a lot of people in the
But you don't want
garage.
5 coming in and then 4 go out of business and now you're left with,
3 and 4 empty buildings.
right.
Well, I was just thinking of that because I'm sure most of you remember years ago driving down Route 15, all of the adult stores that were on the way. Now that 390's in, if you drive down Route 15, they all are dilapidated and look like hell. Weeds growing up and
My question to Robert is can we limit it to a separate building? Or do we have to allow it within an existing building with some sort of separation?
Oh,
that's a good question.
Because I don't.
I don't know the
so-
answer. I'll have to
Are
look
you,
it
are you
up.
talking about dispensary and
No,
use?
just right now,
Just
just the
dispensary.
dispensary.
Yeah.
I don't, again, I don't want it at the 7-Eleven. We've got a rack over here that's got product on it, that I'd prefer it to be in a separate,
Oh, standalone place.
I
something,
didn't think
yes.
about that, yeah.
Just.
Or
Uh,
at the gas station.
Oh,
I think
or
with
would
the
it-
regulations on it, you can't just, there's some sort of control with the actual selling of it.
I've looked through, there's quite a
Think about that.
conditional adult use dispensary, but they don't get into the zoning aspects of it at all. It's more the licensure, what they have to do to demonstrate that they can do it. And I think, as Robert said, the zoning is so new right now that I think we're gonna be trial and error, what can somebody get away with,
Exactly right.
So do you think, just as a lead on to what you were just saying, I hadn't thought about that before, that it would be permitted to be sold in another commercial, like a 7-Eleven, in a restricted area locked up?
So again, I have to look into that. My gut reaction is no, they're gonna treat it like alcohol, right? So in New York State, you can't, well, I guess.
Well, you can buy beer, you can't buy,
Yeah.
Correct.
You
Look,
buy
you know,
wine.
Cigarettes.
spirits,
You can
But
buy
if
that.
they treat it like cigarettes, then it can
Cigarettes,
be.
cigarettes.
I was just in the 7-Eleven tonight to buy this, and on the counter, they've got a bubble jar full of Fireball single shot bottles, right on the counter.
Really?
Are
I don't know if
they,
that's an enforcement
is it the
issue.
real Fireball?
Yeah, yeah.
I thought you meant like the candy.
No, I've got those too, but this, like I said, if you go over there tonight on the way home, look at the jar on the counter.
Right, so that's how to look at it. Is it treated like liquor where my understanding is that needs to be, it has a separate, legal.
A separate store, like liquor stores.
Or is it like cigarettes or beer, where you can buy it at a gas station?
Wow, so that makes a difference.
Yeah, so that, I'll look into that.
Because if they're not looking at kids' license for a beer sales or cigarette sales, I don't know. They're not do it for this.
Well, in the Canandaigua one that Robert sent us, I believe this was Canandaigua, right?
Yes,
Commercial lakefront district, primary permitted uses and a commercial lakefront, blah, blah, blah. Retail establishments limited to the following: bulk stationary tobacco stores and cannabis retail dispensaries.
and the packaged liquor stores. So you're looking.
I don't see packaged liquor stores. Is that a next page?
Oh, so and this is more of a nuts and bolts issue. So what
Okay,
Canandaigua did is they defined cannabis retail dispensary, right? And this is what we would do too, right? So we'll define it in our terminology. And then you go in and you go, let's say we go to commercial code section and you put it as one of the specially permitted uses, or you put it as one of the permitted uses. So Canandaigua put it in their C2 central business district, as well as their commercial lakefront district, their CL district.
right.
Along, like you said, next to tobacco stores, packaged liquor stores, florists, gift shops, eyewear stores. That is dispensaries, that is not lounges.
Right,
I
right,
Right.
think Canandaigua opted out of lounges, just so you.
okay. But it's not, as John's point, it's not clarifying that,
No,
and we don't know if
Is that
a
going to be governed
dispensary
by the
can be
state?
anywhere.
yeah, that'll be a state for sure. I think, I'm pretty confident that it'll be governed by the state. In terms of, they will either give the license to an entity if that's the only thing they sell, like a liquor license, or if they say, no, this is just like beer, here at 7-Eleven, here's your license to sell cannabis in your general store. That'll be up to them, I think, how they do that.
If you want to take this talks about all the licensing requirements that the state, what they're going to have to give the state in order to get a license for a dispensary. If you want that.
Do you have it in digital form?
No, I don't. I was looking at stuff on the internet.
I'll scan it at the end of the meeting
Okay.
and then I can put it back in your mailbox.
Is that this, John?
That's something different too.
That's NICOM's general reference guide for municipalities.
Hey, Robert. I think I know the answer to this, but I appreciate your opinion. Would a municipality be able to own one of these facilities?
Dispensary.
I don't think so.
Hmm?
I don't think town's in the business of business.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh, you want to put a gift?
I'm not touching it, I'm not touching it. Welcome to Rush.
Where a Rush takes on different meeting.
Where it truly is green. Okay,
That was
getting
quick.
slap happy with me. So I guess the question, how do we feel about just commercial?
I either commercial or limited industrial, I favor.
Yeah, I would go with either one of those.
Limited industrial, you're going to have to change the code.
Yeah.
And that 5%.
Only 5% can be retail.
Yeah.
On a parcel.
That's okay.
Which is doable. It's a consideration. That's all.
Well, it wouldn't work on high tech because those parcels, by the time you cut down 5% on one of those parcels, you wouldn't have anything. So you would eliminate high tech. And the only other limited industrial is over there by Fishel and where the old Harper 50 acres used to be, right? The commercial, there's much more
You've got a couple on West
opportunity.
Henry Road there.
On West, on,
Yeah. one
yeah,
with
the,
old-
yeah,
for
the one,
50
yeah,
acres.
yeah. If you grew up in Rush, you knew this place called Harper 50 Acres.
This is 50 acres originally.
Yeah, was it? Oh,
I
okay.
remember that from going to see Wilmer Alexander Jr. and the Dukes back in the 60s.
Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
So
Vince's 50
I think
acres.
there's more opportunity in commercial. And if a dispensary is opened in commercial, it might bring another business, another retail business next to it, which could enhance whatever that area is,
Mhm,
whatever might else be being sold
mhm.
for whatever reason. That's just jumps into my head. And I think with the comprehensive plan work, the rezoning in the hamlet, if that were to take place, where commercial is versus R20 and RMH and whatever else is there, it's so zoned crazy in the hamlet. That would be something, Jean, the comprehensive plan and
Yep.
looking at, if we were to say that, they could use that in their,
Yeah.
right, in their planning.
Mhm.
Does that work, Mary Ann, do you think?
As long as they're
Those are my two
following the
cents.
state guidelines and,
Yeah.
of distances from.
Right,
the-
right.
Correct, the other, overarching laws, but yeah, I'm comfortable with in the commercial zone at this point.
And Robert, if I can just ask for clarification. You can't get a variance to a state law. So if it's 500 feet for schools and 200 for,
Yeah.
they can't go to the zone, they have to understand they can't go to the zoning board and ask for a variance. If the place up there is less than 200 feet from.
Not to my knowledge. no.
I'm just asking. a
Yeah.
question. So what else would you need to know about dispensaries?
We can look, I'll look if there's any guidance regarding density restrictions.
Okay,
Yeah,
And then we can come back and discuss what that would look like.
okay.
I think that's gonna be a hard find.
I do think it's a little early. I think it's a
Well,
little
that's,
early.
it was one of those things on the survey, which I
but if
thought
it's
was
not
a great thing.
specifically mentioned, then
We
we
can-
could
yeah.
put that in our own.
And see how it stands. See if
I'm just saying, we have it for gas
No,
stations.
No, I think it's a good way to try it because
Mhm.
you're gonna see if anybody challenges you, and then you'll really get a definition of whether you could do it or not.
The how the court rules.
You know.
So are we ready for on-site consumption?
Sure.
What do you have for us on that, Robert?
Well, it's the same question. It is, I think, a different analysis because it's a different type of establishment. You will have traffic, you will have patrons visiting and staying, as opposed to a dispensary where they're attending and then leaving. I think you have all the considerations that you would have with a bar. So it's the same question, but I do think it's slightly different analysis.
Can I ask, do we want to make either establishments subject to a special permit?
Can we do that?
You're talking to dispensaries?
Both dispensaries and on-site consumption, they're gonna have to get a New York State license in order to be eligible. But as the town of Rush, do we want to regulate it with a special use permit for like lighting and signage, parking, your density might fall into that type,
So if, let's use the old box store, I own it. I want to put in a dispensary. So let's go back to the original discussion. The state has given me a permit. I simply have to come to you as the building inspector.
Right now, I wouldn't have to do anything.
They could just open up shop.
They could, they'd probably have to go through the code enforcement officer to say that they're gonna change the operation of what they do, but unless they're going to change anything within that establishment, I wouldn't be involved at all.
There wouldn't be, so they don't need us, because they're not building anything.
Right.
There's no site plan.
But we do get in our code for the types of things that require special permits, quite a few things.
Right.
So it's not, we would not be seeing,
We're not singling anybody
Right.
out, but we're just putting another level of, they've gotten the license from the state to do that function. But now we're gonna add the town of Rush requirements. In order for you to do this, in order to use that license, we're gonna control your hours, your lighting, your parking, your signage. And tell me if any of that's unreasonable, but I'd like to see our stamp on it, so we've got some control.
Right, so requiring it to be specially permitted would require them to file a special permit application with the town clerk. It says application shall include a site plan, a detailed statement of proposed use, maps, plans, specifications.
All of which I think is reasonable if you're gonna operate this within the town.
Right.
So do bars need a special permit?
I'd have to look at the zoning.
I'm just curious.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I
Or
don't know
for
that.
pharmacies, in terms
Or
of
pharmacies.
dispensaries.
Yes.
Is more accurate.
Okay, yes.
And the other thing to consider is that a special permit, requiring a special permit would require the planning board to find, we ran into this last meeting, that the proposed use is necessary or desirable to provide a service to the well-being of the neighborhood. It would not endanger or tend to endanger public health, safety, morals, or general welfare. That it's in harmony with the probable future development of the neighborhood.
So that's interesting. Like what
Very.
one for the hamlet,
Well,
Um, anywhere.
It's subjective if it's harmony of the neighborhood. Anything's harmony of the neighborhood.
I was talking to an older gentleman last week and he knows I'm on the board and he was asking my opinion. And he uses marijuana frequently because he can't sleep and he's got aches and pains and problems. And it's the only thing that helps. So, I mean, and if there was a possibility of having it available for him, like nearby,
Yeah.
and you denied that to him, might be a little upset.
Right now, for commercial district, the permitted uses are retail and personal service businesses, offices, and office buildings. And then uses permitted upon the issuance of a special permit, gasoline filling stations, and public utilities or communications installations.
Why wouldn't this
This would be,
classify as retail?
that's what I'm thinking.
Well, so that's why we're codifying it. So if, let's say that we never brought this up, and a year from now, someone wanted to start it up, it would be up to John to interpret the code to determine where this fell, if it wasn't specifically in there.
And I would look at that as saying it's retail, the dispensary, not the,
Yeah, going back to the dispensary.
Yeah.
I mean, a special permit, I have to think about that more, but I'm kind of like the idea of it. But
Some control.
something,
It just
right?
should
Right.
set up the parameters on it. On
Well,
the special permit.
think about it. If there's no permits required within the town and they set it up and it's 150 feet from a church or 495 feet from a school and their operations, then we have to go shut them down once there's a complaint, we find out it's not. Versus we're helping them check off to be able to bring their business into town.
right, now to throw another wrench in the works.
You're good
Here
at
we
this.
go.
If we are, and again, I gotta think this, we are trying to make agricultural uses in the town more user-friendly. Ag and Markets has adopted cannabis as an ag and market, just like corn, wheat, soybean, or whatever else. So,
But we do have a grower in town,
correct.
so that's
But that's
different.
That's true agriculture.
Right.
This
Yes.
is more.
this is retail.
Yeah,
and
this
again,
is-
it's just-
yeah.
It's more,
They're
Christopher
not
Roberts
growing
milk.
it themselves.
no, they're getting it from somebody like
Right.
Colorado
We're
Brands.
kind of like on that edge of that back and forth for quite a few of packaging and processing that we went through with Dan.
Yep.
To me, that this particular case is very straightforward.
Yeah, I like the idea of a special permit just because it puts the town of Rush controls on that operation, but
And with the
Yeah,
base-
I think so.
yes.
Add that to it. We're good for
Yeah.
that,
Of the things we like.
For dispensaries.
But yeah, the density restriction, I think I'd like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special permit, commercial zone.
Mhm. And then we do have to get this map. We don't have community commercial, whatever that's called. All right, are we back to on-site? Jerry?
Lounge,
I think those all have all the same considerations
Yeah.
that you did for the dispensary, just it's a different use.
Because you could have a dispensary next to, or 2 properties down of an on-site consumption.
Right.
I'm not real sure how a lounge situation is, most, from observation, people who smoke marijuana
Well,
are at the bar and they want to have a cigarette or maybe
Well, what's it like
Smoke the
in
pipe.
other states that have this? How does it work?
I don't know.
I'll think about the state smoking restrictions.
That's what I've seen. Go out and have a cigarette or go out and light my.
I
bowl.
mean, they run
Oh,
out of
yeah?
the creek side, out on the porch or out on the yard and smoke and then go back in.
Yeah,
It's
that-
an enforcement.
So do you smoke inside the
Okay,
building?
No.
hang on, I think we're
No.
talking 2
Oh.
different things.
you have to go outside.
You are.
Even
We're,
for a
we're,
cigarette.
we're talking right
Okay,
now, I hear you guys talking about just consuming it because it's legal. We're focused, my brain was on an establishment like a bar that is a on-site consumption
yes,
only for this purpose. It's not like I'm going to the creek side and then I'm going out and, partaking in
Well,
something.
Your sole intent is to go in, purchase some
Like,
cannabis and consume it there.
what do they used to call them? I don't know if they're hookah bars or
Hookah bars,
whatever,
that's
where they used
exactly
to
what
be.
I was
This,
going.
Oh.
this is what I'm thinking this is.
That
It's
is-
just a
that's
cannabis bar.
Or right now, you've got the
Thank you,
cigar,
Robert.
the cigar bars.
Are there cigar
You don't
bars?
smoke the cigar.
Is that
That's
what a
true.
hookah bar is?
No, that's the water.
That's where you got the water pipe and the hoses
With-
and the, you know.
There's one up in Henrietta.
yeah,
I
I've
gotta-
seen it.
There used to be a couple.
I gotta get with the program.
So
Yeah, so
I still think commercial.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
me too.
When you say commercial, are you ruling out limited industrial?
Commercial is not limited in industrial.
That's why I just wanna
Yep,
make
just
sure.
commercial.
Yep.
What else did we have? Density. Now look at density,
That's the
special permit.
Do we have any density restrictions on bars?
Oh, yeah.
I
this
was
is-
just typing in bar to the E code and I wasn't finding anything.
No, what about with New York State, like with the dispensaries, 500 feet, 200 feet? Is there anything like that?
Oh, it's the same,
Is it the same?
The same for-
Oh,
okay.
for
Okay.
a house of worship or a school?
correct.
Okay,
Okay,
Are we going to limit it to a separate structure or could it be a multi-use?
mm,
You know, if a guy's got it, Snyder's over there on West Henrietta Road, he's in a commercial district,
Mhm.
you know, I
Yeah.
wanna put a room on the side, or I wanna,
yeah,
you know, how do you wanna limit how it's handled?
oh,
So I can look at that too. Again, I don't know this for a fact. I think that the dispensary I think that whether cannabis is can be sold at a gas station is more likely than whether or not the gas station could put a room off the back for you to smoke cannabis in. I think that.
sell it and smoke it.
Yeah, I think that is far more unlikely, the latter. But I don't know that for sure. I'm imagining an on-site consumption establishment is just like the hookah bar that you have seen. It is an establishment specifically reserved for partaking in this activity.
okay.
I've never been in one. I have heard from other municipalities, board members have gone in different states to them, and they said that it
We
was
have to have a road trip.
not, yeah, he did, that's what he was doing, actually. He said that it was, surprisingly, maintained or Right, I mean, these are gonna be very heavily regulated, so it will, I'm sure, not be.
I think we gotta research that. I didn't mean
Well, I
that we
think-
had to research it,
Well, I
but I
think,
mean, in terms of like.
Oh. let me turn the camera
I know.
off.
I meant, there must be photos available, Massachusetts has these, don't they?
That's where you went, yeah.
Okay, so there must be some description of how things are set up. Or photos, or,
Well,
to get a visual, and if there's
I'm sure there's
standalone.
places in New York State that are already, right? There's gotta be.
would
I don't
think so.
know, I would be surprised, it's very early still.
Okay. Well, the
At
other
least
thing
legal ones, I should say.
Right,
that popped into my head is because we did not opt out of either. And other towns may have opted out of one and not the other. We may be more at the forefront potentially for where
I don't know
other
what Henrietta
towns.
did.
are.
What Henrietta did.
And I'm thinking you can't look at New York City because their rules are different for every.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking Monroe County and Livingston County would be just
I
interesting.
want to say that Henrietta allowed dispensaries and not on-site consumption.
I know Pittsburgh opted out of both.
So to your point, people in Henrietta who are looking for an on-site consumption establishment might come to a close by.
Just curious, why did Pittsburgh opt out?
I don't know.
I don't see bar
In our.
in our code generally.
well, the Creekside, for example, is a bar and grill, you could eat. You can buy food
Mhm.
and have whatever to drink.
Can you have alcohol at Colby? No.
I don't think they have.
You don't have a liquor license?
Not that I've ever noticed.
So do you think we've gone far enough for tonight on that, Robert? or
Yeah,
is
I
there
think
anything else?
density restrictions is a great question. On-site consumption, commercial especially permitted for both dispensaries, on-site. And I will look into the issue of whether or not you will need a standalone structure or not for these places, establishments. Time, place, and manner restrictions in terms, so this is topic number 2. Do you want to restrict where it can be used just generally, right? Because it's legal, so let's say I go to Henrietta or here or wherever and get it from the dispensary. Currently I could use it, or someone could use it on a public sidewalk or in a public park or those types of places. So like I said, Canandaigua, if you had in front of you, they prohibited it on any public sidewalk, street, highway, parking lot, bathing beach, public park, or other such public place. And I think David noted that he doesn't believe our current town code for parks has any prohibitions on smoking.
Smoking, right.
So again, if there was nothing in place, then someone could do that.
Does the
But you
town,
can't walk around with an open container.
Correct.
right,
But the currently New
can
York state
smoke.
law is treating where you can smoke marijuana as if they would treat tobacco,
Really?
not as if we were.
It was
drinking
alcohol.
liquor.
and at the Fireman's Carnival this summer, it was interesting. In the beer tent where cigarettes was allowed, there were signs that said no smoking of cannabis was allowed. So I didn't know, I thought that
Weren't
was
there,
interesting.
Places at New York State Fair where you could smoke cannabis?
I-
On the
It
ground?
it could be, but I was,
think they had-
that sign jumped out at me over there, that,
But in a restricted area.
Yeah, in a restricted area, but you could smoke.
is the
fairground
town, does the
property.
town hall campus right now prohibit, because I know schools, you can't smoke cigarettes, obviously. anything.
We prohibit smoking here.
The
So,
library also is going to prohibit it. nearby.
prohibit smoking
Yeah, so
Of-
this is where I was going to
of
before.
cigarettes or of cannabis?
Well, both, I think. So pursuant to penal law and public health law, individuals may not smoke or vape cannabis on school grounds within 100 feet of entrance, exit, or outdoor areas of a school or of a public library. Or in or on a school bus, of course.
So 100 feet would be the town hall campus. So how do we feel about public property that is outside of that range? That's one thing you're asking us, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So parks, any town property.
Or sidewalks is another good example.
Okay, can you bring alcoholic beverages on town property?
Cannot.
Cannot. So I
Then I agree.
feel the same way about this. I mean, some people may not want to inhale other people's smoke as secondary use, secondary, I don't think, I don't think we should allow that. If you want it, you go somewhere. Yeah,
Well, smoking's, again, I'm not a medical doctor, so I will make that disclaimer. Smoking a cigarette, normal tobacco does not impair your brain functioning versus alcohol does and cannabis does.
correct. And alcohol, you're sitting there, if you were having a drink, it's not gonna affect me, but if you were smoking,
Oh,
I may know it
Yeah.
or feel it, I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
depending. If you blew it, the smoke in my way.
I'm
Sorry.
okay with that. What do you guys think? So we're saying town property,
Public property or town property?
public. What would be public, so besides town property, what else is considered public property?
Yeah, what does that
I
mean?
guess I was thinking sidewalk.
Sidewalks.
and easements.
And again, you can't go, with a bottle of alcohol and be drinking it.
Just walk down the.
But you can
Hamlet,
smoke a
you know,
cigarette
Ken-
walking down
Kenley
the
or-
street.
Right,
Yes, but
that doesn't impair you can't get a speeding ticket for smoking a cigarette, but you can get be impaired. DUI, driving under, whatever it is, yeah, might not be alcohol, it could be something else. I don't know. That's my first thought.
right, my initial thought is that it should not be permitted in public places. I don't know, it could be offensive to some other people or small children, people with small children. I mean, it could be
You've got-
permitted
you've got a
areas.
Parade,
I'm sorry,
you have a parade,
yes,
and you've got all the people lined up on the sidewalk, sitting, standing, this group here is partaking and this group here doesn't like, just eliminate it from the
Yeah.
equation.
I'm okay with that,
I think. Anyway, that's where I'm leaning right now.
tentatively, yeah.
Any thoughts, Dan? No?
It appears from my research that California doesn't have smoking lounges.
Does not?
No.
Really?
They have hookah lounges, but they don't have
On-site
specific
consumption
one
lounges.
for weed.
Interesting.
If I was a state trooper, I'd sit right outside the door.
Yeah, but they do that outside of bars
No,
now.
they don't.
They don't?
Well, you can limit yourself to one beer and you're not, whereas this, I'd be sitting right there.
Well, I don't know at what point you're impaired.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. Oh.
It's very known with alcohol, what the
Mhm.
limitations are. With cannabis, you don't know. Maybe they do, I haven't seen anything published.
Yeah, I don't know. But
I don't want to be the first one to try it out.
research, John.
You and Jean report back to us. Okay?
Do I get an expense voucher?
See the supervisor on that one. I'm out of that one.
Okay, that answers my questions for that. Obviously, I'll come back with density restrictions and standalone building answers.
Yeah,
I
that-
think
yeah.
there's a lot of them that the only difference is the consumption on public property. Other than that, it's gonna be kind of-
Hey, onward supervisor.
All right. I still haven't digested all of that yet. Given that our attorney, Robert, is going to come back to us with some answers to the questions, we can move on to number 2, prior written notice of defects requirement. And I believe this covers such matters as unsafe conditions that would exist for people on town property, such as broken steps or anything that would fall into that realm. And the town clerk, I believe, would keep a record of notices of violations. Oh, good, thank you. I've got it, but not highlighted. Wow, granted municipal homeroom law. That's unusual. The reasonable care and diligence. So we can have a discussion about that. I'm very much in favor of anyone calling our attention to any condition that is unsafe for a visitor to town property. We just had recently the lack of proper grounding on the
Rush Riverside Refuge.
on the Rush Riverside Refuge, and it was the diligence of the highway superintendent and the deputy superintendent who said, hey, you got some problems over there. And it was discovered, thank goodness, before somebody got a jolt.
Mhm.
So it would be, similar things like that. I had someone tell me that the steps around the front veranda had to be replaced because they weren't up to code. And I asked our building inspector if he would measure those steps, and he found them within code. And, well, you know how that goes. But that complaint would have been filed with the town clerk. And the building inspector's result would have been attached to it. And
So is this something as simple as our town attorney drafts a local law?
I think
We
it
hold a
is.
public hearing and,
I think it is, because it doesn't have to have chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's
Right, you already have in your code. He pointed it out, section 80-1
mhm,
has this language, so that would be the only part you would change. Would be to delete because we call it constructive notice provision of this. In other words, requiring that it be actual notice. Someone has to give actual notice. So I can go into more detail if you want me to. So right now, under our town code and under New York State town law, a municipality is not liable for dangerous defects, like something in the sidewalk or an issue, unless it receives written notice of it or it has constructive notice of it. It has been going on for so long that someone reasonably should have noticed it and took action. This is a recommendation from NYMER to say that the municipality can say, no, we want actual written notice. We're going to delete constructive notice. We're going to delete the ability for towns to be held liable for just should have knowing something was there, and we're going to require written notice. And this town could do that. So it would just be deleting that language to require written notice being the only way that a town can be held liable.
Could constructive notice be subjective? Like, I told you about that, or maybe you didn't.
Well, well, exactly. The written notice is going to be concrete. Either you did or you didn't. And
Yeah.
here's the written proof or not.
Robert? How about if someone notices giant hogweed or poison ivy or poison oak? Same as a structural or foundational consideration?
No, I would say no. It's not, that's not a, well, I don't think that's a defective condition. I don't think that's a dangerous or defective condition. This town law is talking about, as you said, structural things, so culverts, sidewalks. And, you know, the more practical answer is that someone who has poison ivy probably isn't commencing a lawsuit against the town, but someone who slips and falls and breaks their leg may, or who slices themselves on a sharp culvert may, so.
You don't know where they really could have gotten the poison ivy from, if they slipped and fell on a broken sidewalk.
That's a, right, that's a dangerous defective condition, and an overgrowth of a certain plant, I think is going to be a way different discussion.
What about potholes?
Yes. Yeah, that's another good example.
Wow. We don't have a shortage of them.
So if somebody slips and falls on the front steps, town's not liable unless they had previously notified you that that was a dangerous condition?
Yeah, so first it's a two-part. So first, the steps have to have the dangerous condition. If you slip and fall because you slipped and fell, that's no big deal. But if the stairs are in some way defective, that's correct. This would make it so that someone who had to have written to the town, doesn't have to be this person, but somebody had written to the town and said, your stairs are defective.
And then someone in the future gets hurt.
Correct. If nothing's done about it. Currently, if it'd be
If I slipped and fell and broke my skull, I wouldn't have any recourse unless I had previously sent you a letter saying that that was a dangerous.
Or someone.
someone,
Someone.
correct.
Did you imply earlier that you know of some of these laws that exist someplace else, or were we on another subject then?
This is a NYMER, this is coming from NYMER. NYMER has a sample, so I'm sure it exists in other municipalities. I haven't looked to see which municipalities have and have not, but NYMER has provided a sample, so I'm sure that the towns have adopted it.
Why don't we commission Robert to using that as a straw man
Mhm.
and adopt the boilerplate that applies to what we might encounter here and see what he comes up with.
What does NYMER stand for besides New York?
Municipal. New York Municipal Insurance.
Regulations? No.
No, it's a company. It's
Oh,
technically
yeah, it's okay.
client.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. It's okay. It's New York Municipal Insurance
Something with an R.
representatives, maybe. They are very common, and they may even be Rush's insurance company.
Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, okay.
There is NYMER, and then there's a school version as well, and they represent almost all municipalities that I've heard of. And so we represent them on occasion. When I'm sometimes representing a municipality, it's because we've been hired by NYMER to represent them. And it is in these types of cases.
This would cover ice and snow. and-
So you're asking him to draft the local law for us to
Yes.
review and?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Put that one in the box, in the folder.
All right, we can move on to
Yeah.
this was exactly what the building inspector and I spoke about earlier today, I think it was. And that is the New York State Part 1203, Code Section 36.
I think we copied up the emails. It was just for us, that were between John and.
Right.
It's a confidential.
We have a have a lot of places in our documented code that can be confusing, especially when it comes to defining the difference between the code enforcement officer and the building inspector. I think historically, it goes back far enough to when the code enforcement officer was a official supervisor of the whole process, and the building inspector kind of worked under the direction of the code enforcement officer, but that was packed up and sent away several years ago. And I think now what we've got works fine, but we need to define it more so that someone reading the code in a section that involves the term code enforcement officer or building inspector, they can define easily by reading it what each responsibility and role is.
And I understand that. I agree with that, but I also read that the state. Sorry. Marianne's home and joining us from home now. That this, Robert, correct me, the state chapter 36 revisions talks about code enforcement officer, right?
Correct.
So, and we can pass what we want to pass. Is there a conflict between the state chapter 36 if we were to change to building inspector from code enforcement officer?
There's a conflict with the model code, but it's not a New York State statutory regulation that you'd be in conflict of. So this all, I guess, about backup here, right? So this is what we need to pass before the end of the year that's what prompted all of this, right? So we went through, and John went through originally and noted which part of the model code, we needed to change and which part was consistent and inconsistent. And then David and I went through and modified it, and our code was pretty good. There was definitely some repetitiveness that we've taken out. So we made a lot of changes to part or section 36 to bring it up to speed with the model code. And we have done that. And so that's done, and that can be something that the board can pass for the end of the year. This is a sort of a similar and related issue, but also a different issue in terms of changing the responsibilities and duties of a code enforcement officer and a building inspector. So we drafted this section 36 to resemble the model code, which was our original instructions. It is a different task to change the entire Rushtown code to make it so that the building inspector has different duties than he has now. Because currently under the town of Rushtown code, under the model code, generally how we see it in New York State and town law, code enforcement officer and then the building inspector is someone who assists the code enforcement officer. And that's how it's traditionally done. It doesn't mean that the town would be in conflict by changing it, but it is a change. So before we did that, we wanted to make sure that that was something the town board wanted us to do, because it is a wholesale change to a lot of the town code. Anytime the code mentions code enforcement officer, or building inspector, we'll need to change it to say the correct person based on whose duties it is. Which I just typed it in just out of curiosity. Code enforcement officer comes up 229 times in the code. And it's probably about 14 or 15 chapters that we'll be going into. So it's, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's just a different task.
And I'd like to add that the model code is just that. It's a model that the state puts out, and every municipality has the ability to determine what their structure is. If you look at the town of Perrington, they have a director of building services. And that person has a code enforcement officer, he has building inspectors, he has electrical inspectors work for him. So there's different models all over the state. You've got municipalities that you have building inspectors that work for 6 different municipalities. You know, so I don't see any conflict whatsoever with what Rush is trying to do, and me, if you will, because I had the discussion with Jerry and Amber that, you know, are we going to go back to a unified position? And if you are, that's fine. If you're going to keep it the way it is, it's very confusing right now to people. They call, they just don't know who to talk to.
I agree. And they both carry carbon copy credentials, certifications, if you will, by the state. I think the only variance there could be fire marshal activities. Although, John, I know you've been involved in that in the past.
But again, traditionally, I'm building side. I could enforce the fire code, but I'd have my nose in the book a little bit more
Sure.
than Doug might, and vice versa. So that's, you know, right now, the way we operate, if there's a code enforcement action that is building related, we'll have a discussion, myself, Doug and Jerry, to say, okay, I'm going to take care of it. Or if I have something that I want Doug to do, you know, we have that flexibility. But
Since this has to be done by the end of the year, we have a public hearing scheduled on October 26th to get public input on the draft local law, which has been drafted. I know David said the changes we might make based on our conversation can be done. Can the wording be done in just this without the 200 and whatever in the rest of the code?
I don't
Did
think
that
so.
make sense? What I'm
It would be
asking, or
inconsistent. I mean, you could do it, but it would
it
be,
would create other problems.
it would be inconsistent. You would have, for instance, if we wrote in 36 that the code enforcement, that the building inspector is in charge of fence permits, then in the fence section of the code, it's referring to the code enforcement officer. So you would have
but
possibly.
we changed that in the fence. We changed it to building inspector.
We change it officially.
We did.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
I use a
Didn't
different
we?
example. I use a
Didn't
different
we?
example.
I know
Electric-
one of them we
Electrical
did.
inspection. So right now, electrical expenses, chapter 47 refers to the code enforcement officer. That's probably John's duty, right? Generally. So,
It's part of a building permit.
right. So we could change it in 36, but you'd have to go through each one of the chapters, and I think there's
Yeah.
at least 14 or 15.
It's not doable by August 26th.
October.
October.
I'm sorry, what did I say?
August.
August.
2023, yes, it's doable by that.
We'll get her done.
Probably not.
I think the difficulty here is Rush's might not look like someone else's. But I think it's got to look consistent for our employees and our residents to utilize it for whatever application they.
I
select.
agree. But we have a public hearing scheduled for October 26th. And the whole chapter 36 has to be adopted by the end of the year.
So here's the thing. if we want to change 36 to differentiate between building inspector and code enforcement officer according to how we do business,
Mhm.
we're not under the same deadline for those other code sections. We could methodically make sure we change them over the next couple of months.
That's correct. 36 has
Is
to be
that okay to
adopted.
do? That, because you were just saying we'll be in conflict with other
Yeah, I
parts of
mean,
the
you
code.
will be in conflict until we change it.
But it's not illegal.
No, it's not illegal.
Okay.
It's just-
There's
it's-
conflicts in
it's-
the code all the time, yeah, but
Yeah,
go
we know
back.
that.
Yeah.
We've been trying to clear up things that existed for years, but
Would a quick fix be to establish two definitions as an interim measure? And I'm just thinking out loud here.
so what do you mean by that?
Right now, I don't think building inspector is defined, or it may be as a subset of
It is.
CEO.
Yeah.
Do you change those definitions as an interim measure before you can tackle the rest of the?
So you could hypothetically change a definition of the building inspector or change it to just be code enforcement officer / building inspector. Have them share responsibilities of all things.
I mean, that might be.
That's still-
Yeah.
It's not what you're looking for
No,
generally.
it's interim. if anything.
Well, think about that because they both replace each other during periods of absence. They're just basically capable of doing the same thing, except each one has a specialty.
In Rush, we have it.
Well, what if they just, what if they both had both titles?
yeah,
It doesn't bother. me.
No, I'm
using-
just trying to
so
figure
you
out.
can have the same title, but different responsibilities
Right.
That,
internally.
that works.
Yeah.
Can
Is
we
that
do
the
that?
easiest way?
You could do it that way.
And then we don't need to change anything. Just this. 36.
Well, you don't have to change 36 because it says,
No, you would have to change 36 because 36
Oh, no,
currently
right.
says that John answers to Doug, which obviously isn't what happens in
Ah.
practice.
Right,
But that's currently what it says, right? So it is a
Right.
different change. You could change it to say John and Doug, building inspector and code enforcement officer are interchangeable. As long as you're comfortable with all the repercussions.
and both
of that.
report to the supervisor or whatever.
That's me,
That's
whatever.
you, moi.
Yeah, I'll have to talk with David about if there's any other repercussions to that.
Okay,
But yes, you could do that too.
When I was in the position, I carried both titles.
Mike, I'm like thinking out loud, civil service comes to mind. I'm not sure how that affects civil service.
As long as we're not more than 20 hours a week, we're outside of it.
Okay,
right, because he was code enforcement officer and building inspector.
Okay.
And I think,
And fire marshal.
and that's why the code, and again, I wasn't on the board, just never got changed when it was split at some
Right.
point to two separate
Yeah,
individuals.
they did one part, but not the rest.
So what is your suggestion we do between now and October 26th?
well, I think he's gonna talk.
I'll talk to David and then
Okay.
if we can make that change, we'll just make that change in advance of the October 26th meeting. It'll still be on public hearing. And I don't think offhand you would need to, if that's the only change, you would not need to renotice it or anything like that. If you went in and changed each chapter,
Mhm.
then you're gonna have to renotice everything.
But this is a way of doing that.
This gets 1203 passed on time.
While we
And
work
then
on
you
the
can deal
rest,
with-
right?
If John and Doug are comfortable with that,
Yeah, I would definitely make sure because again, that means I'll be changing. And obviously practicalness is different than whatever we write in the code. It's been happening that way now. But I will be writing that Doug has the same responsibilities and duties as John, which is probably not the case in practice.
it's not.
But that's what I'll be writing.
Think about the customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's an easy way to allow John to be treated as a code enforcement, as the code enforcement officer slash building inspector who is equal to a code enforcement officer.
What I wouldn't want to have happen, although it can happen now, but very rarely. John goes and does an inspection or an enforcement on something. And then Doug goes the next week and does the inspection or an enforcement. And the customer says, wait a minute, the guy who was here the other day didn't say that. Wait a minute, the guy who was here the other day didn't tell, wait a minute, the guy who was here the other day approved it. What are you doing here?
Yeah, I mean, right now, under the code, again, not in practice, under the code, John is serving at the pleasure of the code enforcement officer.
That's
So-
not right.
I know, but that's what the code says, because
I
it's
know,
never
but that's, we
changed.
gotta change that.
We'll put it on our workshop
Right
agenda.
now, I don't do any fire marshal inspections, but we have had some overlap in property maintenance and some other enforcement issues, that weren't fire marshal related.
Talk to David and see what he advises.
Yeah, I will. I do think that's a reasonable fix. There are repercussions to it in terms of, like I said, Doug will have the same responsibilities and duties as John does and vice versa. So, but it's all, again, it's not as if the code is currently accurate and you're changing it to be inaccurate. It's currently inaccurate in terms of how it actually works.
The potential is there, but in practice, and we don't write up what our job responsibilities are in the code. It just says what we're capable of doing.
All right, so you're gonna talk to David, get back to us,
And make those changes in advance of the October 26th.
and we are gonna move on. Or are we gonna move on?
Well,
Or
it's 9:30 and
I know,
it's. I still have questions about the budget thing, so I still got a question on that, but
we
for,
are having a budget meeting.
okay, tonight?
No,
Oh,
it's 9:30.
right. For the process and procedure, the only thing that I think you wanted to talk about was the second comment period. And we said we were going to talk about that tonight. If we want to move this to the next, I am fine because I reformatted the process and procedure. If I can add, if we decide we want it, we don't want it, and then we can work at it at the next workshop.
Here's what I came away with. The supervisor sets the agenda. The supervisor sets the process for running the meeting. I think that's somewhat dictatorial, and I don't think it's inclusive of other opinions on the board. So I came away last week comfortable with and thinking the rest of the board likes it the way it is and really don't want to change it. So nothing need be done.
Okay, so I sent out late today, so I will reformat it one last time, and at the November workshop, we will go through the entire process and procedure so we can get this thing adopted.
We've been thinking about it a long
A
time.
long
I know.
time,
I would
yes.
like to get it done too.
Yeah.
Get it
All
on
right.
The agenda.
Dan sent something out late just today. I just checked with the town clerk. Dan, just so you know, from what Dan Chase sent out. And from that email, we found this local law. The first three, but she does not have anything on fencing. So if you and Dan can look up to see,
He said that
did we,
he saw it in eco.
really? She doesn't have it in her book, so I'll check in the book then tomorrow. Okay. All right,
I thought we
I thought we
put
did
that
that.
through.
I thought we did too, but it wasn't in her book, so she didn't think she had it, so she wanted us to double check on that.
Yeah, he said it was an e-code.
Okay,
I can go through the rest here. So definition of apartment market, I have that. I can make that local law and circulate that.
okay.
Townwide setback, we sent, you have that package or I've sent that package out.
Setback for what, though?
This is
Was this
the
for the
one
farm?
hundred and ten to
Yeah,
one hundred.
thought we agreed
Oh,
to
the
that.
100 foot, yeah, but we've
So
never
did
that
agree
done,
just
on
means
that.
but we've never done the public hearing and
Correct.
move forward.
Oh, okay,
You
well,
have everything.
we agree on it. Let's
Yeah,
do
we
the public
agreed on
hearing.
it, yeah.
So you sent us a sample for a public hearing and all
I
that
sent
stuff?
that, yeah. the whole
Everything.
package. I sent it back. I sent it fully back, I think, want to say in like June, and then we met. And we didn't make any changes to it, so it never got changed. So that's
We
all
never,
it is.
okay.
Yeah.
All right,
We can move on?
that's Robert, yep.
Yeah, so AG building being built on land without primary residence is probably a much bigger discussion.
That's still open.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, I did. I actually drafted an analysis, so I'm just running it back to you.
Dan, do you recall why that was originally implemented? You gotta have a primary,
I don't know why it originally wasn't, but that's what I've always heard.
no, it's, yeah,
I wanted to put up a barn before I built my house, to store material in it. That was not allowed.
No,
a lot of people do.
I would think in the code it would show when it was adopted. Doesn't it normally show when local laws are adopted in there?
That was,
Like a
but a
footnote.
lot of those went away when we made the major revisions to the code several
Oh, okay.
years ago. And they,
What we're using is a subsection of two different codes to
Mm,
deny that.
Yeah.
It's two.
I
I've
just
got 'em
know
written
it's
down,
been
not
in the
here.
code for a long time
Yeah,
that it's not allowed.
I've got them written down. I don't have them here
It's
with
30
me,
years
but they
anyway.
were two sections.
Right,
that
yes.
Council gave me that says together
Okay.
these say you can't do it.
all right, sir.
What, Bill?
so we're gonna move on to boardroom.
Boardroom tech,
90.
Robert, if
Oh,
I
okay.
only can get
Maybe we did the
one
town.
proposal
I
for
have-
this room, what do I do? Do I do an RFP? And if nobody, what, it's over the threshold.
Right, and I looked at that, and I looked at the procurement regulations, and they required to.
I had
Even
three,
though we had requested three?
I
we
had
already
three
did.
last year, and I can only get one person to update it. Neither of the other ones want anything to do with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to talk to
Okay.
David about that. I
Check it out.
yeah,
I know when we were doing school work, we put out RFPs, again, public funds.
right,
If we only got one proposal, that's all we got. That's who we awarded.
yeah. I mean, that's the answer I want to give, but I also,
Okay.
like I said, that it says two, so.
Okay.
David's very rigid on that, so figure out a
All
way
right,
to
I'll work
sweeten
on-
them up.
I'll try my best.
Well,
Yeah,
it's not like we didn't try to get
right, right.
more quotes.
And I
people-
don't recall seeing anything in there about, unless a diligent effort's made, et cetera, but that's ideally what it would say.
Okay,
All right, we can move on to the last but not least agenda item. The Rush Riverside Refuge hours and sign stating the hours. I think originally I was very comfortable with sunrise, sunset because that can accept all the 4 seasonal changes. And we don't have to make provision to ratchet it back or move it ahead when the seasons change. What do the rest of you think?
That was my original
you
thought.
had some input from a horse's friend too, didn't you, Jerry, or no?
Yes, but I think that
No, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't.
I wanna do this with the horse's friend agreeing to it. I don't want to follow their lead
Oh, I
because,
agree, right.
and it was Karen Caton
Canton.
who told me that they want a different approach, but I said, thank you very much. But I think I want to deal with Matt Doward because he is the principal
Mhm.
that we're in a relationship with. And I'd like to make it sunrise to sunset, but that's certainly something we all need to.
Is this gonna be controlling the gate?
Mhm.
Who's gonna be responsible for the actual
Well,
operation of it?
A horse's friend was willing to do it if we did it, say, 7 a.m. to say 7 p.m.
Mhm.
and establish somewhere where people could park before or, but, and then they could walk in at any time,
Mhm.
sunrise, sunset, but parking, driving in would only be from 7 to 7.
And what would happen if a chain gate was there at sunset, which is now 7:30, and a emergency response was needed over there?
There's the key
Fire
that would be
department,
go to the fire department and the sheriff, just like the town clerk said that they currently have, which when I went through the key cabinet for Riverside Refuge. ugh.
May I
With the
remind
town
you
clerk.
what Denise and I went through with the keys?
Well, we realized, I said to the town clerk, there is no lock, there is no chain, so that key that you have that says it's at the sheriff and the fire department, they need to know that there is,
There's another consideration that they brought up. If you have that driveway, unless you put rocks
Yeah.
or big logs
They-
all the way across the front of the property, people can just drive around it.
right,
They've got a big log on the south side. They haven't dragged another one to the north side yet.
And they'd have to go all the way over to where that hedgerow is.
Right.
So
so they were thinking of putting some sort of a parking area in front of wherever, so that people could park if they wanted to go in before 7 a.m. Park their car and physically walk in. Because I know driving to school for all these years, the sun would be in my eyes sometimes at 6:30 in the morning, or 6:20. So when we say sunrise, the gate would have to be open sometimes at 6:15. Other times, the sun doesn't come up till, 7:15.
Absolutely.
So to me, I don't know, that's just my thoughts.
Well, you and I are together on that.
Well, no, I think a time makes sense, not the sunrise, sunset. Because,
Oh, I thought you were agreeing with me.
because vandalism and vehicles driving around at midnight, 10 o'clock at night, just does not make sense to me when the sun's not up. So if it's physically people just parking and walking in, hopefully, if they were doing something not proper, it would be more difficult for them to try to, I guess, escape after they have vandalized something versus hopping in a car and,
So you're saying the
Feeling
park
out.
is not closed? Only closed
it's
to
closed to
traffic?
vehicle traffic. So
Well,
you could say sunrise, sunset for pedestrian and vehicles 7 to 7.
You gotta know as a professional biologist
Oh,
that there's nobody over there after dark unless they're snipe hunters or vandals. Think about that.
mhm. Right, no, and the same thing in the morning. If you want to walk your dog, I would think you would be fine with parking on, right at the entrance
Why
and
not?
walking your dog in, so having a gate chain that wouldn't open till 7, because no one in the town, I don't think we're gonna get anyone in the town to go sunrise and sunset and lock and unlock it versus if we can work with a horse's friend to do that and yet keep it open to the public, whether it's vehicular traffic or pedestrian traffic.
I can live with that.
What do you
I
guys
like
think?
pedestrian sunrise to sunset, and the gates open when the gates open. I mean, and Then you
Oh,
can drive your car.
that's an idea.
Then nobody should be in there after dark.
Yeah.
It closes.
Yeah.
The park.
Claims it can't be here now.
Mhm.
I can live with that.
So what
The
did we
gates
hear?
Open when the gates open,
So pedestrian,
but
tra-
we have to know what time we're gonna set, but
right,
when we have somebody to open, close the gate.
right. So is that something you'd want us to talk to Matt about to see what
Yeah, see when they're-
responsibility he'd
see
be
when
willing to
they're-
take on?
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, not that they're responsible for anybody that comes in there, but
right.
they do open the gate and they do close the gate.
Jean?
They're not restricted by those hours, though. Is that correct? They would have a key to get in and out?
Who, Matt?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes, what?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but then there could be a problem. Somebody's walking their dog and they're locking the gate, the car's inside there, and now what do we do?
Now, what do they do?
Oh,
I didn't even think of that, Dan.
That's a
Thank you.
good point.
Damn dog ran away and now I can't get out.
They have use of
If,
the,
if the sign, if, yeah, right, if it says 7 to 7.
They've got to have some ownership to get their vehicle out of there.
That's true.
Is that gonna be Christmas Eve?
Hopefully they'll have sleigh rides over there Christmas Eve. so.
Ooh,
I
that's a
know,
great
or strong
idea.
carriages,
With bells,
yeah,
bells.
bells and whistles.
Sleigh bells.
horsehair blankets.
All right, no, those are itchy. I will look into that and I will let the board know what they say.
All right,
But if there is going to be a gate that gets locked, the tenant has access 24/7, don't they?
yes.
Yes,
Yes, they, I
yes.
mean, they. pay
He would
rent.
have a key, but in the lease, it says, like, the people that come to his establishment,
Yes,
they're limited by hours as well. It's not like they would be coming and going.
well,
all
that he
hours of-
sets,
No, it's in the lease.
oh, in the lease,
Yeah, his
okay,
hours of operation.
okay.
They generally don't ride horses at night.
Unless it's Christmas Eve.
unless it's Christmas.
Halloween.
Halloween.
Ooh, that is one.
All right, so Supervisor, I
Yes,
heard
ma'am.
you say we have to have a budget meeting
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah,
before October 5th?
I am
Today's
going
the
to talk
third.
to the town clerk tomorrow and have her schedule a budget meeting.
Okay,
Comprehensive workshop.
Wednesday.
Budget meeting workshop,
yeah,
whatever we want to call it.
Because you guys sent us out, it says by October 5th, the clerk presents
That's our schedule.
oh, that's our schedule.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's subject to
Phew. Okay,
alteration.
all right. Thank you. Very much better.
Anything else? Then I move, being no further business to conduct at this meeting, I move we adjourn. Everyone in favor?